Welcome to episode 3 of Vikings and Asatru. Obviously, a couple of these, well, pretty much all of these videos so far have been the what's wrong or what people are not understanding about Asatru and Vikings in modern days. And I know it's supposed to be an entire series about explaining what it is, but I think in order to know what it is, we really need to break through what it isn't and kind of kick out the stereotypes and the cliches and the misinformation, the false information, so we can kind of break through, get a new start, a fresh start, and then I'll start going on what it actually is for the stories, the sagas, etc., the concepts, the social structure, all of that fun stuff. So, without anything else, I guess I'll get started on one of my more infamous topics, what we refer to as brosatru. Now, these are the bros of Asatru. These are the ones who exhibit the very modern, manly, her kind of concepts of Asatru, and this is pretty much going to just be breaking through that and showing how this is not actually an accurate representation or portrayal. So, without further ado. So what is brosatru? Okay, so when you think of what a Viking is, or what someone from, the Viking era, medieval times, Scandinavia, the concept of what we see in modern society is very different than what they actually were. What we see today are big, burly men, completely decked top to bottom, tattoos, long hair, long beard, very intricate hairstyles and decorations, black clad leather outfits, that sort of thing. And that's not actually true. It might have been in some cases, but as a whole, that is very, very inaccurate. That is actually created more so because of the modern metal scene and sort of modern romanticized ideas and ideals of what Vikings are. Obviously, the show Vikings did not help, as with a lot of other representations. But, yeah, so what did Viking men actually look like? Well, for starters, they were actually rather effeminate in their features compared to today. Me, as a 5'10" woman, is taller than pretty much every Viking man. I mean, obviously there are some exceptions, but yes. I, at 5'10", am almost 2 inches taller than the average Viking man. And they were actually a lot more effeminate. They had a very recessed and not prominent brow compared to today. Their jawlines were far more feminine and not as defined. And on the other side of that, the women were actually more masculine. So they had a more prominent brow as compared to today, and they actually had a far sharper jawline. So the problem that a lot of archaeologists have is that they don't notice or recognize female skeletons without the bottom half of the body because they have to use the pelvic bone and the expansion that normally happens during puberty to actually separate between men and women. When you're thinking of the other features, pretty much the only writings that have really survived and the ones that have explained anything showed of pretty much social requirements where it was thought that you really did need, once you started the ability to be able to grow facial hair, you had facial hair. But it was pretty clean cut, kept close and short to the face. And when you think about it, most of these people were farmers. They were not necessarily warriors by trade or by profession. They were farmers who took on the role of warrior when necessary. So when you're working hard in your fields, when you're doing all this sort of work, you don't want anything hanging down in the way and to get in your way. And so, for the most part, their hair was kept short, maybe to the collarbone area, maybe, and then their face was kept rather short on the beards. And also, with the tattoos, there's only been one account written of anybody having tattoos, and they called them the Rus, and it was from Ibn Fadlan, and he explained that they had, like, these bluish-green tattoos all over. But again, only one account of this, and it was more so in the Denmark area, so not really representative of everybody as a whole. Another prominent feature of brosatru is this obsession with alcohol, and everybody's like, fuck yeah, booze. It's not necessarily the case. Yes, mead, ale, sometimes wine that was imported was present, but it wasn't that prominent to be consumed all the time. They still consumed fresh water from fresh sources the majority of the time. And the alcoholic drinks were actually brewed by the women. It was their responsibility. And even Odin, who a lot of brosatrus just love to hail to in a very ironic sense, he preferred wine over ale or mead. He also said drunkenness is pretty much like a bad thing. He chose wisdom over drunkenness, and there are several stanzas in the Havamal that actually that are essentially Odin speaking about how drunkenness should not be partaken in, and that you should be conscious and aware of your actions at all times, because in a lot of cases that drunkenness can lead to very dishonorable actions amidst yourself and other people, and the consequences of that are just not worth it. Another common theme that I see with brosatrus is this, as I had stated previously, they really like to hail Odin without understanding what Odin truly is. So they as people, as these brosatrus, sort of hold this idea of this big masculine man, burly dude, rah, her kind of guy, drinks all the time, does all this stuff, like does dude stuff, and that's not really true. When you think about that, there's actually another god who exemplifies and embodies all of those features. And he's actually known as the god of man. It's Thor. He is the god of man. He is the one who represents men and is the closest to man, looks after us, actually cares about us, because, spoiler alert, most of the gods don't give a shit about what humanity is doing. They're just there. Yes, you give your reverence, you give your honor when it's necessary and pertinent, but as a whole, gods don't care about people. Now, Thor is the one who sort of exemplifies all these features, like I said. Odin is actually fairly effeminate, and he's actually, if he were just a normal man in Viking society, would be seen as ergi, which is essentially like non-manliness, because he partakes in very woman-centric activities. The magic, all of that stuff, like, he does things that are not necessarily honorable. He does things that are kind of shady. It kind of makes sense why he and Loki have a blood bond. It gets complicated, but he is not the kind of man in physical features, in physical stance, or in actions that even remotely ties into this concept of what brosatrus are so obsessed with him. There is no brotherhood of Odin. Odin doesn't give a shit about you. If you die, he will maybe use you as a warrior in Valhalla to go through Ragnarok, but that's only if Freya doesn't pick you first. Everybody forgets this. Freya is the one who gets the first choice of the dead. Now, and they go to Folkvanger. Nobody really knows what happens there because there's not much written about it, but Valhalla is not the first place that you go after you die. And it's also not just for the slain in battle. When you actually look at the translation, it's the fallen. Anybody who dies still has a chance to go to Valhalla. And when you think about it, it makes sense. Generally, if you're a really good warrior, you're not going to be dying in battle. So why would that be the only requirement to get into Valhalla, where Odin needs you to fight in Ragnarok, if you die in another means? If you die in another means, you're not going to Valhalla by the traditional definition. That limits him on his resources and his capabilities to fight in Ragnarok. It is very limiting and does not make sense. So to go back a little bit to the god thing, the totem pole of honor and worship in this faith, even though it's Asatru, faith of the gods are not the first ones who you honor. They're actually what would be higher on the totem pole, because the lower ones of more significance and importance, in terms of ranking, it would be number one at the top, would be your ancestors. They are the ones who come before you. They are the ones who have direct connections to you at every single point of your life. You share a luck with them, which I will cover in another video. Their actions directly affect you and every other person in your family. Your actions directly affect everybody who comes after you. It is a web of familial luck. And the reason why you want to honor these people is be like, thank you for giving me this luck. This sort of luck is not a permanent thing. It can vary, it can fade, it can grow. You can get more luck, you can lose luck. So you kind of want to honor the people who affect that directly on a day-to-day basis. The other one, under them, still not the gods, or over them if it's on the totem pole, because again, the bottom is the most important. But that is the Vater or the Whites, the land spirits. the creatures of the land, the sort of elves and dwarves and goblins, gnomes, brownies, whatever you refer to them as, those are the ones that live in the lands. They are the keepers, they are the tenants of the land, and they affect your everyday life. If you live on a plot of land, it is a brownie of some sorts, however you call them, that often gets honored or made offerings to keep the whole land area happy. A very unhappy brownie has been known to do things to cattle and livestock of the not so positive nature. So you want to keep these spirits happy. You're in their territory. You may own the land, but you do not own the spiritual connection that they have to this area. And so you want to keep them happy, day-to-day basis. Then, under them, or at the top of the totem pole, are the gods. The gods really don't have an effect on your day-to-day life aside from the fact that they created the worlds, including Midgard, where humans live. Now, the thing is, it's not that they're not important. Obviously, creators, they have significance. Obviously, there is a sense that they can help. They're not necessarily like other religious gods where you pray to them and things happen. They support you while you do the things. They expect you to do all of this stuff, and then they give you the strength to do it, sort of deal. They may give you a couple tools or whatever, resources, but they are not going to do the job for you. It is very contradictory to what a lot of people think that the gods are. They are not the end-all be-all to belief and religion. They actually have very little to do with your everyday life aside from being, here's what we created, go live in it. Now Odin, again, brosatru seem to have this obsession with him. He has very little care for humanity on a day-to-day basis. For the most part, it is an appreciation as a partial creator of humanity, but he really doesn't give a shit about you. That's the base term. What he does care about is what you can do for him. He just really wants to win. He wants victory, he wants to get through Ragnarok, which obviously doesn't happen, but he needs resources. You are a resource. You are essentially cattle in his master plan. Yes, he's going to take care of you because he needs you to get to that point. He needs you to fulfill what he wants. But in terms of like a positive relationship back and forth, that does not exist. Again, for the most part, that's what most gods are. Thor is the exception because again, he is the god of man. He is the one that has more of a connection with mankind, not necessarily on a day-to-day basis, of course, but he is more respectful and interchangeable in terms of relationships than Odin is. Now again, does this mean that I'm telling you, you can't worship Odin? You cannot have Odin as your main deity that you see in this religion. No, I'm just telling you, with information, why you might want to rethink and redirect that passion of whatever god you're attached to Thor. He is specifically designated as the god of man, the protector of man. He embodies and exemplifies all of these features, all of these characteristics, all of these actions that brosatrus think and believe in. And so if that is the kind of path that you want to follow, just redirect it. Odin really doesn't care. Odin thinks you're a dumbass for getting drunk all the time. It's not conducive to a positive relationship between the follower and the deity, the believer and the god. It just doesn't work very well. Yes, you can still continue to worship Odin, but again, Odin is the kind of guy where he will call you a dumbass. He is not very positive towards these kind of contradictive actions. This made-up idea of what I call Brodin doesn't exist. He is not this bulk, beefy dude with one eye, a long-ass beard, long gray hair, who's like, goes around just getting drunk and taking women. Yes, he takes women because he's a man whore. It happens. A lot of father gods are like that. But he's an old man. He's a really old guy. He's not the exemplifying concept or idea of what brosatrus believe in. And again, I'm not trying to tell you how to believe your belief. What I'm trying to do is give you information to educate you to make better choices. Always again, to the choices. If you want to continue this brosatru belief, then you do so with a better understanding, hopefully, after watching this. Hopefully you'll understand the contradictory actions of all of this and sort of sway into a more natural understanding, but I am not the one who to tell you that. So next time I'm going to talk more about the familial ties, go more into that ancestry thing, talk more into the idea of luck, the soul, that sort of concept stuff. But for now at least, thank you for watching.